A leaked Supreme Court brief has America talking about an issue that seemed to be settled almost 50 years ago. Talking about Roe versus Wade, a law that put into place to allow women to terminate pregnancies safely and legally. We're talking with Pamela Merritt, Executive Director of Medical Students for Choice this morning about what this could mean to average Missouri and Kansas women.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for weighing in on this conversation. Why is this coming up now, 49 years later?
Great question. Almost immediately after the Roe v. Wade decision came down in January of 1973, conservatives began to mobilize and organize around using abortion politically as a voter mobilization tool, but also in various corners and layers of our communities to restrict access and to create hurdles and to shut down clinics. So even though it feels rather abrupt for those of us who have been doing this work for a while, and I've been doing movement work for 20 years, this is the result of 49 years of war and battle.
What was your first thought when you heard about the leak that came out with the Supreme Court earlier this week?
I wasn't surprised. Obviously, it's an emotionally jarring thing to read, even though I was preparing for this moment really since November of 2016, because the Supreme Court was on the ballot in the election of 2016. But it's one thing to intellectually prepare yourself and another thing to see the constitutional right to privacy, that off of which so many important rulings have since been based, basically treated as if it's easily discarded and dismissed by the majority currently on the Supreme Court. So my first thought was shock and dismay and concern, because I know people who will be harmed by this, and I've worked really hard throughout my career to prevent it from happening.
What will this mean if these efforts actually happen to reverse Roe v. Wade? What will it mean for women of color and poor women across this country?
I think it's important that we brace ourselves for some manner of dilution or destruction of the constitutional protection for abortion. It's clear that the majority can do whatever they want on the Supreme Court, and despite the turmoil from this leak, I expect them to do something horrible when it comes to Roe. The implications are devastating for all people who can get pregnant, but particularly for women of color and Black women, because we have really serious maternal and infant mortality crisis. And we also are culturally more likely to be head of households, more likely to have a catastrophic or traumatic birth outcome, more likely to have a hard time accessing birth control and reproductive health care. The more vulnerable an individual is to the crisis of an unplanned pregnancy, the more this is going to impact them. It also includes people who are living in poverty. Can't stress enough that the United States of America has the worst maternal pregnancy outcomes in the developed world. We spend the most money on health care, and we deliver the worst outcomes to pregnant people. And Black women are 4 times more likely to die as a result of a pregnancy complication that's within the first year of giving birth. And the same holds true for Black infants, regardless of education, regardless of how much money. Serena Williams had a catastrophic birth, and many people who make far less than Ms. Williams also have experienced that. Not having access to abortion means that when your life is at risk, you don't have that option. When you know that you aren't healthy enough to have a pregnancy, not have a catastrophic outcome or potential catastrophic outcome, you won't be able to terminate that pregnancy. And then another thing to keep in mind is that there's a criminalization here. If abortion is criminalized, and now a lot of people are accessing medication abortion through online pharmacies, which is safe and effective, in up to 12 weeks, but it is illegal to get medication without a prescription. For Black women and women of color who are highly surveilled and highly policed, and who often have the state overstep their bounds into our private decisions and our private lives, we are extremely vulnerable to criminalization of anything, and particularly criminalization of our medical decisions. And then the final thing I think it's important to note is that the same protections that give us the right to determine whether or not to terminate a pregnancy also protect us from the state telling us whether or not we can get pregnant. I'm not speculating here, and I'm not catastrophizing. The reality is the history of the United States is littered with instances in which Black women and women of color have had our reproductive future and our bodily autonomy violated to benefit the state. And it's important to us that we have a constitutional protection because we often live in communities where the state is not looking out for our best interests.
Do most Americans support Roe v. Wade being a law in this country?
Yes, most Americans support. I think it's something like 7 out of 10 Americans support the constitutional right to abortion, and most Missourians and people in Kansas as well.
Why is this now an issue if most Americans support this?
My honest opinion is that all of this is rooted in a conservative effort to protect white supremacy, and controlling who can reproduce and who has bodily autonomy is a core principle of white nationalist policy. And they've stacked the federal courts and they've stacked the Supreme Court so that they no longer need to do what's popular. They have lifetime appointments that were granted under Trump. So there's an incredible, horrific tyranny that comes when people have a lifetime appointment and are deciding, what benefits them in this small, vocal minority. But they don't have to answer to the people anymore.
Where would you suggest people go if they want to learn more about this topic and let their voices be heard in the national conversation?
Absolutely. I strongly recommend that people check out Sister Song, Women of Color. You can just Google Sister Song and they will pop up. That is the reproductive justice organization that leads a lot of national work, and they are amazing Black women-led organization. And then also to tap into local work that's happening. There's a ballot initiative in Kansas that will be on the ballot in August, and people need to vote no because it is trying to take away a constitutional right to abortion. And then in Missouri, people can reach out to Pro-Choice Missouri and find ways to take action.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate the info.
Thank you so much.